Hey y'all, it's your girl Sonia, and welcome back to She Say Sports. Today I have with me former DePaul Blue Demon star and former NBA All-Star Terry Cummings. Hi Terry, how are you today?
I am doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you're doing these days.
For me, at this point, I'm pastoring a church in the Atlanta area, actually in the Stone Mountain area. Been pastoring it for 13 years. Been in ministry for over 40, going on 43, 44 years.
44, yeah.
Yeah, and then running an entertainment company, Cummings Entertainment Group, a publishing company, Terry Cummins Publishing. Both companies are about 35 years old. And I am recently the CEO of a new television network that is a hybrid called Virtual.
Wow.
And it's a hybrid in that it does streaming. It's a streaming network as well as connected to a cable network called VidGo. So got a lot going on between those things, but there's always more. I've got 3 music projects I'm working on and different things like that. So this shut-in pandemic has been a blessing to me because you can get a lot done when you shut up in the house.
That's true, and a lot of people don't see it as that, but it was a pretty good year for me as well. So I mean, yeah, there were issues, but God was still good.
Mm-hmm.
So that is awesome. Wow, we'll talk about some of the music and you being a pastor later on in the interview. But Terry, you played at DePaul, which was one of my favorite basketball teams growing up. Also North Carolina Tar Heel, which I'm still a fan.
Mm-hmm.
But in the early 80s, DePaul was a team to be reckoned with, and also their coach, Ray Meyer. Coach Ray Meyer was one of the winningest coaches in college basketball. He had a record of 724 wins, 354 losses, which placed him number 5 in career victories among college coaches. He coached for over 40 years at DePaul, which was called the Ray Meyer era. How was it playing for a legendary coach like Ray?
Well, the relationship I forged with him was one of the most important of my life. And then, most of the cats I played with wouldn't go in and talk to him. They felt like he was disconnected. But I would go in before practice. I would go in after practice, sit in his office, and he and I would talk sometimes for hours and just be everything across the gambit,
Mm-hmm.
and just touching bases on everything. But playing for him was one of the greatest honors of my life, and not because he was Ray Meyer, but because he was that guy, that man that allowed me and anybody else who would want to become their own man.
Wow. And, he seemed like a true family man. I remember that, with his wife. I think her name was Marge. Was it Marge?
Mm-hmm.
I remember, and, of course, Joey. He became coach after Coach Ray Meyer retired.
Right.
But apparently he was more like, was he like a father figure to you? And
yeah, he was another.
Parents?
Yeah, he was another father figure because my dad was active in my life too.
That's great.
So he was another away from home. I mean, I was the first one in our family to go to a major college like that, and I didn't even know I would be able to go to college. I mean, before the athletic scholarship was offered, and I wound up at DePaul because I recruited myself to DePaul. They were the only school. Yeah, they were the only school that I did not hear from, and so I called them one day and asked them, why haven't you all recruited me? And they said, we've been recruiting you, we just can't get close to you. Your coach won't let us talk to you. So I went around the coach, called them, set up an appointment to go look at the college, and wound up signing a letter of intent not long after that. But that's how I got to DePaul. I recruited myself there.
That's and so I'm thinking, coach recruited you, but you recruited yourself.
Yeah, they would recruit me. They just didn't. They weren't able to get past the coach. Yeah, and so I had felt really led. I wanted to stay close to Chicago because I felt like that's where, my destiny was, and it turned out it was. So I wound up going in and sitting down with Ray, and Ray sold me, and it wasn't even about the school.
Wow.
I just knew that I would have a support system in him, and that we would be able to talk, and he would help educate me. I've always been driven, even with my father and outside of him, toward other men that, had the ability to lead me and teach me things that I didn't know. And there was always men and women in position that would along the way.
Wow. So was DePaul you said other schools were recruiting you, but was that your first choice? I know you said you wanted to stay close to home.
Well, I went to the University of Iowa when Lute Olson was there and visited, and I was on my way to UNLV, where Tarkanian was, when I decided I would call DePaul. And once I made the call to DePaul and met with Ray, I never went to UNLV. I never went on the trip. So, but all the major colleges, Indiana, everybody, were reaching out. But my family, we were not used to that stuff, so I handled pretty much most of it on my own. And my mother and father let me because they didn't know any more than I did. And so in the end, unlike a lot of the kids today, their parents play a big role in that whole process of decision making. Back then, a lot of us had to do that stuff on our own because our parents weren't familiar with the system.
Exactly.
It's more familiarity to it now because it's broadcast all over social media, all over the country, all over the world, and kids look forward to having that experience with their mothers and fathers and so on, but that wasn't the case back when I went there in 79, 80.
That's amazing. That is, wow, I never would have known that. I really was thinking, even though they couldn't get to you, but I'm thinking that was the reason why you came was because of Coach. So you mentioned Jerry Tarkanian, but back then, you had your Bobby Knights, your John Thompsons, and your Jerry Tarkanians. How was Ray Meyer as a coach?
Ray was a great X and O's guy. He was. I think that if Ray could have suited up and got out on the floor and played and put all the rest of us on the bench, he'd have done it. But because that's how intense he was, and that sometimes would get in the way of things, especially with the younger players. But Coach Ray's intention was never to demoralize anybody. He was just intense and into the game. And he wanted everybody to play the way he saw it. And I think it took Joey, his son, to calm Coach down from time to time because Coach would go, man, we used to kid about him biting on his tongue. I said, that thing got to be leather now. He's been biting on it for 40 years. He would bite on his tongue, like literally chew on it when he gets upset or he's so entwined into the game. I think some of the greatest experiences were just getting to know he was fair. And again, from coming up in the inner city of Chicago, where you live around primarily black folk, and you go to DePaul, it's primarily white, and you're having to learn to deal with them culturally. And my whole concept of white folk was that they're not fair, that they're brutal to us, because I'd only see them as firemen and policemen in our neighborhood. Right. And so when I got to DePaul, I had to learn to transcend my thought process and allow myself to see the world broader and give people a chance to prove themselves.
I love that.
Before you make a choice or a decision. And I think for the most part, from as far as I'm concerned, it was very favorable. The responses that I got back, there were people that were negative, but I never focused on them because I believe if you focus on what's negative, you'll never see what's positive.
That's true. That is absolutely true. You mentioned that he used to chew on his tongue, and I was going to ask you, because it was reported that he didn't use profanity, and most coaches then and now were professional cussers. Was that one of the ways that he dealt with his frustration, biting on his tongue? And
probably.
Yeah.
and very demonstrative, but always respectful. I've never seen him just go off on a player or go off on people. He was always a kind of person, and it wasn't just to the kids that were going to school. when I bump into people across the country and the world and they talk about Ray, they talk about Coach Ray in an affectionate manner, because he was not just a father to me and to us as teammates. He was a father to everyone he came in contact with. And they saw him that way because, again, it got back to that thing of being fair. And fair doesn't mean people are perfect. It just means that to the ability they have, they are fair. Because you can't be something that you're not.
That's true. That is true. I was looking at some clips, and Joey said that, he was telling some of the players when he became an assistant coach that Coach was like really, really like, how he would get excited and be loud and, talking loud. He said, well, he had calmed down, and the athletes was like, really? And he was like, but he did say when he would bite on his tongue,
yeah,
he knew to leave him alone. He had, he would try to like talk to him about certain stuff, and when he saw him bite his tongue, he was like, I let it go because I knew it was time for me. It was like, let it go. He made the decision. So that's interesting. Yeah, I agree with you on the fair part. It's just your ability of being fair to somebody, and he seemed like that person. He really did.
I mean, and again, I'm going to add to the extent they could, because it's like when Obama got in office and all the colored folk thought he was going to just pretty much turn the world upside down for colored folk.
Right.
When you have to be, if you are fair in your heart and mind, you can't be that demonic a person just because you're in the highest office of the land and to appeal to the people that look like you. And I always thought with that, and also with Ray, when you're given that opportunity to be in that seat, or to be someone looking on at that person and you have favor, your job is to do your part. My job at DePaul, my part was I became, I think, the captain on the team in my sophomore year. And that's with Mark Aguirre and all the other seniors there.
Wow.
But you do your part, and my part was the guys came to me and said, well, we need to have a voice with the athletic director and with Coach Ray and Joey, and they said, so we nominate you captain because he likes you. and the like was only based on the fact I wasn't afraid to spend time getting to know the man. And he poured into me, and I've always been that. I'm a sponge. If you give me something that you know how to do and you teach me it, I'll learn it better than you.
I love that. That's true. That's awesome. I was listening to an interview with Al McGuire, who was the head coach of Marquette University from 1964 until 1977.
I remember him.
You remember him?
Mm-hmm.
He talked about how Coach Meyer couldn't get the top Chicago players during his time in Marquette because DePaul being a small school with an even smaller recruiting budget. However, he also mentioned that Coach Meyer was a heck of a coach and an avid teacher of the game, which drew a lot of the players to him and the program. What are your thoughts on McGuire's statement?
I think it's right. I don't think DePaul came into the impactful version of DePaul that you discussed when you first came on the air until black players were invested into the university. Come to find out, once you get into the university, there have been plenty of other black cats that have come through the program, but they were not the quality of the Garland, Clyde Bradshaw, Mitchum, and then Mark Aguirre, myself, and then down the line, the Ty Corbins and, Kenny Pattersons, all these cats that come because of the first one of that caliber, which was really Mark Aguirre, which he led DePaul before I came there to the Final Four the year before. Now, It was because of Mark, too, because I saw something in how he was allowed to play, and I loved the DePaul style of basketball. So, it's all those things.
Wow. Gotcha.
It's all of that and more, but, yeah.
And, like you mentioned, Mark was there before you, but you and Mark were some of the top players out of Chicago to go to DePaul. What kind of effect did you and players like you have on the program at that time?
I think it was immense. I mean, because think about it, there were other players involved, and when I say players, entities. One of the things that made DePaul progressively what it was WGN. It was in its infancy stages too, but it had become a flagship, and it was spreading around the country and around the world. And so, who had a contract with them? DePaul University, for basketball.
That's
so
true.
Whereas we were playing, Al McGuire was doing our games on national television, but we had a contract with WGN, and everything we did at DePaul was on WGN. Whether it was sectional in that it was in part of the country or it was in the whole country, we were exposed. I mean, people today I bump into realize and remember Terry Cummings from DePaul more than they do 18 years of professional basketball.
Wow.
But there were and when I think about it, I get it, because WGN introduced us to everyone in the country, whereas in the NBA, you get introduced based on the market you're in, and I played in mostly small markets my first 10 or 12 years. And so it wasn't even the same. I was still way more exposed at DePaul than I was in the NBA.
It's interesting that you said that, because I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. That's how I saw DePaul on WGN. You say your people are from Jackson, Mississippi?
Yeah, my mom and dad are from the area.
What? Okay, we'll talk in a minute. So that's how I fell in love with DePaul, from watching that, because it was like, it would come on during the week, and you didn't really see, we didn't have ESPN, and I was 10 years old, I think, when I first started watching DePaul, and I was like, that was my team, and my family lives in Chicago, so I've always, at age 5, Chicago Bears and the Bulls became my team. Because I spent 3 times a year in Chicago. I was there quite a bit. So I'm a Chicago girl, sports fan, so it's just amazing that you said that. That was the flagship of DePaul, and how they became so prevalent and how people started knowing about them, because you wouldn't have known about them really without that channel. You're right.
Yeah, they brought a lot of positive press, and I mean, the people that I talked to, they use the same verbiage. They say, I used to watch y'all on WGN every week, and woo, and and it's interesting, because it tells you the plight of true success in anything you do is you have to have a vehicle that carries the message like a herald to the countless number of people that you want to reach. And
That's
WGN
true.
was that for us. I mean, gave us a vehicle to be exposed.
That is very interesting. So, one of Coach's strategies to win games was controlling the tempo. I remember that. Did he use this strategy in most games, or did it depend on the opponent?
No, by the time I got to DePaul, he didn't have to, because a lot of times that strategy was used at DePaul prior to us coming, because he didn't have, effective offense to the same extent. He had players who could score, but not score like we could. Like we could average 100 points a game easy. Right. With that DePaul unit that I played with those 3 years. But if you look back over a lot of the games at DePaul, they were slower, because he had, that was what he had to work with. He got a lot out of his players,
That's true.
But if he had maintained some of that, we probably wouldn't have lost in the first round or second round of the tournament for 3 years straight, because the teams we played against employed that whole theology against us. They slowed the game down. The 40-second, I believe, clock, 25 or 40-second clock, and they did not shoot or run their plays to the last 10 seconds of the clock. And we, being who we were, didn't show the patience, to break them down and work the score up where they couldn't play a zone against us. They had to play man-to-man. But in those games, unlike the regular part of the NCAA season, we just acted out of character. We were not as good a team in the tournament because of that.
Very interesting. When you mentioned how we would lose in the first and second round. You don't understand what I was so distraught, and I would be crying at home and beating the wall. And my dad would be like, Sonia, you go sit down. I know you're upset. I would be so upset.
Well, you wasn't by yourself. It was frustrating. I mean, it's finally one of the reasons I thought it was time. You know, there were a couple things, time for me to leave DePaul. I felt like I achieved pretty much everything I could have done there with what we had to work with, and felt like my timing to move to the next level was essential. And when I got to that place, I could not base leaving on staying. I had to base it on my family, being able to support them. We, as a family, we were in a tough place, and I got married at the beginning of my sophomore year, so I had a son a year later, which was my junior year.
Okay.
And so I had a family to take care of, and DePaul wasn't doing that. They weren't giving me nothing under the table. In fact, they took the scholarship monies that allotted for me to pay rent, and I had to take that money and pay rent. So there was nothing extra over after that. So when I decided to leave, it was definitely a decision on what I thought was best for my family and me, and not for DePaul at that time. As much as I had such great respect for the school, and I still do. And I still do functions and different things with them. So
that's awesome. And I was going to ask you, what were his thoughts when you and Mark McGuire, and I know, you know, other players went pro, Tyrone, Rod Strickland, but I know you and Mark, well, you played with Tyrone as well, but I know.
Yeah, I recruited Ty to the school. Back then they let the players do that, yeah. I recruited Ty. I recruited Kenny Patterson, a lot of the guys that came, I think Rod too.
Wow.
So
okay. So, wow, so how did he feel about when you guys first went pro?
I went to Ray only after I talked to the then wife and to my mother and father. That I went to Ray and told him that I was considering going hardship. And he told me, he said, you know, you do whatever is best for you. I would love for you to come back for your senior year, but you do whatever is best for you. And that was the encouragement that I've been fortunate to have from most of the leaders, and male or female, that have been in my life since I was a kid. They always offered me the opportunity to be my own man.
I like
you know, and I've always looked at it that way. I didn't look at it for them to make choices and decisions for me. I wanted them merely not to get in the way.
Interesting. I like that. So what was one of the life lessons Coach taught you that is still a part of your life today?
I think that sense of fairness.
Okay.
Even if there are times people won't let you be fair because they want you to side with them or the other side because they don't know how to be neutral, but I do. And I think one of my greatest gifts that started back in high school with Coach Horace Howard into college with Coach Meyer was that I was given the opportunity to be my own man and learn how to be neutral so that people could trust you if they needed to talk about somebody that you were close to because they knew you wouldn't go back and tell them. And then I've had that respect from people for years because I'm not the guy that goes back and do the talking. You know, I keep things to myself, and since I'm a praying man, I take it before God and I leave it there, and I go on about my life because that's a burden to try to carry around on your own.
You're right. That makes a lot of sense. You're right. It is a lot to try to keep, to be not only a secret keeper, but, you know, to try to, you care about that person so much that you're trying to fix it at the same time. So you're right. That makes a lot of sense. You know, you mentioned some of my favorite players. You know, you play, and I really think Kenny Patterson, my mom was, her maiden name is Patterson. I really think we're cousins. I used to always tell people he was my cousin. But Kenny Patterson, Tyrone Corbin, Mark McGuire, Jerry McMillan, just to name a few. Those were some of my favorite, and yourself were some of my favorite players at DePaul.
And I recruited Jerry.
Really?
Yeah, I played with him at least 1 year, I think.
Wow. Do you keep in touch with any of them today?
From time to time, we'll see each other or bump into each other, but I think I've never in my career as a professional athlete, collegiate athlete, or high school athlete, just hung with guys just to hang with them. Now, I grew up in the streets, and I had cats that I did that with, but even those guys I was really intimate with and formed in respect to knowing them, because I grew up with these jokers. But when I got to college, I had to do a separation because I believe that in order to lead people, you can't be with them in everything they do and have them respect you. You know, you can't. You know, we had cats that did drugs. We had cats that loved the club. I mean, at whatever time or however they felt. And I always felt like, and I wouldn't knock them, but I felt like if I was going to be respected, I was going to have to be different.
That's true. I agree. I totally agree. So, you know, here a lot of people may not know this, but you became an ordained minister back in 1977. How old were you, like maybe, 16, 17?
Yeah, I was 16 years old when I got called to ministry, and I was ordained in Chicago. My pastor, one of my pastors actually, at the time was E.R. Allen, and she had a huge ministry down on 111th Street, tremendously anointed and gifted and a loving person. And Apostle Richard D. Hinton was the overseer from Monument of Faith Church in Chicago at my when I was ordained, my ordination. So I mean, it was you never really know the impact of things when you're young until you get old enough to look back at them and see them forming, or to actually see them formed. You know, but at 16 I was ordained and grew up in Kojic. I think most of us black folk are familiar with Church of God in Christ. Yeah,
I grew up in Kojic.
Yeah, I grew up in it, and would be the jurisdiction on State Street, down on State Street in Chicago, 40th, I think. And I would go there. But my first ordination was in the non-denominational church, because when we grew up in Kojic, Kojic did not preach or allow the young people in sports. They didn't allow you to play sports. They didn't, school. A lot of the old school cats didn't believe in college or upper education. So a lot of the things that I had to do in spite of the fact I knew that the people that I thought would respect it didn't, because they were taught against it themselves. Mm-hmm. But I believe that by being Terry Cummings and accomplishing the things by the grace of God I have, that it gave other young people an opportunity, because the coaching people always say, "Oh no, he's a part of our church," and they see him, So and the kids look at that. Well, if he's doing it, I can do it. You sure can. Don't shortchange yourself because someone's dream died inside of them. You got to live.
You got to live. You absolutely got to live. Did you always know you would serve the Lord in this capacity at even an earlier age than 16?
Yeah, I've always been different, very prophetic. I was always a seer. I could see things. I knew I was different than pretty much everybody around me. But I learned real early to keep your mouth shut and walk it out, because everybody ain't with all that,
That's true. Yeah.
And it's been a great journey, growing up in the Lord, growing up in true, what I call true Christianity, because true Christianity is not based on Democratic or Republican beliefs, and it's not based on whether Jesus is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white man or a curly-haired, dark-skinned man. God is a spirit, and we who worship him in spirit and truth. But if you don't know God, you got to know him spiritually. That's right. You can't build idols around you and proclaim these idols to be God when God has already told us that ain't who he is.
That's true. Absolutely. I totally agree. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And people have to know, because people have to know that. And you see a lot of that on social media now. Jesus wasn't white. I don't care if he was purple. I know what he's done for me, and the relationship I have with him, it's a relationship. It's not about religion, and people have to know that. So I totally agree.
That's the key point that I often share with people, that I'm not religious. I'm relational. Exactly. And I believe that the premise for it is not to be religious. The premise for not being religious is to form a relationship with God that is all personal and that is all yours, because he allows it. I mean, the whole point of Jesus dying on the cross was so that men didn't have to go through Peter, Paul, James, and Mark, that you can go on your own to the Lord and cry out to him, you know?
Right.
And that creates the relationship.
That's right. That's true. You know, you've been in the ministry now for 44 years, and many people, like, you know, we just was talking about, many people don't believe in callings on your life, but it's so real. I know, you know, you feel like you were called to the ministry. Do you believe you were called to basketball? Yeah,
I think all of it is the same. I think that I don't think that people understand God in his entirety. No, none of us do. But that God has a purpose for everybody in the earth. There's a scripture that says that we need to be conformed to the purpose of God's will. And until you are, you don't reach the destination he desires or designed for you. You know, so I believe that whether it's ministry or politics or medicinal or medicine, you know, all of us have a calling, and that calling literally is what you were put in this earth to do. And what I found is most of us will wind up doing everything that pertains to that calling until that calling becomes true, and we look at all the bits and pieces and say, well, now this makes sense because all this stuff goes together. I know I was called to do this because of all of this. Right. You know, and I look at it in my own life, you know, the businesses, everything confers to me that, you know, these things intertwine, and God has ordered my steps all the time. Even when I was wrong doing things, they would test to prove whether or not when I got to the place of destiny, I was going to be able to accomplish God's purpose.
I love it. I love it. And, you know, Fred Hammond has a song called Purpose by Design. And I tell people all the time, you know, I'll put that on my page, hashtag Purpose by Design, because I understand purpose, and I understand that everybody has a calling. We are, no matter, you know, what it is.
How small or how great.
Exactly.
And that was the whole point of the parable of the talents, because you're going to have to give an account. If you take it and bury it, you still got to give an account of it.
You got to give an account for it.
Yeah, because you know
you just kept those 10.
Yeah.
If he don't, you know, absolutely. I agree. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good.
I agree.
It is interesting. I know we were gonna. I'm gonna probably jump out in front of you on this, but we were talking about sides and different things as believers, taking sides in this whole political climate. And the scripture tells us that Jesus was praying to the Father one day, and he said, Father, leave them in the world, not to be a part of the world, but to be an example to the world. And that's where I get my heart set and mindset about neutrality. God desires us to be neutral and to get our information from him so that we won't have to be a part of the world. We won't have to accept the theologies of the left or the right, because truth is the thing that will set and make us free, not siding with these groups. You know, because it has brought our country and our world to this place of divisiveness, is the fact that we no longer desire truth, generally speaking.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, but as believers, we have a responsibility to be neutral. Neutral means that we're hearing from God, and that whatever God says supersedes whatever man is doing.
Right. And I mean, that's scripture, folks, period. If you are a believer, you're supposed to pray and not take sides. And it's hard. It's really hard. It is. These last 4 years have been some of the most challenging of my life when it comes to politics. And I have to remember, the Bible says that we're to pray for those in authority that we may live a peaceable life.
Mm-hmm.
And, I may not have liked who was there because I did not. And it was hard for me sometimes, I'm not going to lie, to pray for him because I wanted to pray damnation on him because I did not like him. I'm human. However, I understood that it's a spirit, and we fight against spirit, not flesh and blood. And it's
absolutely.
It's hard sometimes, but
you
have to pray.
I had a particular issue with the part of the body of Christ that would go out and throw curses at people or prophesy and say things and be errant about them, and not take responsibility for them. I think, too, in my prayer time with God, because I needed to be really clear as to what was going on, Trump would probably have won another 4 years if he had, and this is the truth, if he had a repentant heart. But the man came in telling you, I don't need forgiveness. I don't feel like I did anything wrong. Well, that's, pride comes before your downfall.
That's true.
And humility before honor. I mean, it would have been an honor to have 4 more years if he had been more humble. But this man left out the office, tearing up everything, and it's something when you look at it, it makes you feel some kind of way. But I believe this, and I don't know that we touched on it. I think having Trump in office for 4 years made a lot of us open our eyes and understand, that what we have is very fragile. What we have is very special. And if we all don't come together, because I believe that we are given a period of time to correct what needs correcting. And you needed a different kind of president, a different kind of council to develop that. And so Trump wasn't going to change. He was going to be Trump, And I don't think that by any means that means Biden is the savior. I believe that, our Savior is still the same, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. But I do believe we've been granted a reprieve. And we all have an opportunity to work some things out in ourselves and stop expecting them to come from politics or from religion. It is an individual thing first. Get yourself right before you start pointing fingers. Get yourself right before you start to think that you have the ability to change things. Because if you can't change yourself, you can't change things around you.
That's true. And we had to literally fight for our democracy.
Amen.
This election, we had to fight for it. And people, I've heard people, and we're going to move on through the years, my vote won't count. It doesn't matter. It's already rigged.
And I was one of them. I'll be honest.
Really?
When I was younger, I was one of them. Because I couldn't see my way through this plethora of foolishness called politics. And that it seemed that no matter how warranted change was, they were not going to let it because it would take power away from them.
Absolutely. That's true. And that's what they were fighting about. And, it's just amazing. I told somebody, and I've mentioned this on my show before, I had a friend, she used to, when we were in college, she had really, really bad acne, and she used to have to take this medicine and put it on her face, but it got worse before it got better. That's how I see America right now. We got really, really bad acne, and it's gotten really ugly right now. It got real ugly. Started, with George Floyd last year, but it's getting better. The medicine is working. Yeah,
but it needed to.
Yeah,
it needed to. There's a saying that there can be no new covenants or new testaments without shedding of blood. For every change that is major or minor in our life, there will be some type of bloodshed.
Yeah.
And that's the only way things will change. Now, if you looked at it from Martin Luther King or JFK or Robert Kennedy or Malcolm X or some of the other civil rights leaders, we might look at it and say, well, they don't even add up to the same, but it doesn't matter. It's about the bloodshed.
It's about the bloodshed.
Yeah, it's not about education. It's not about civil rights. It's about all of those people that we could mention, George and all the rest of them, Breonna, we can truly say they shed blood.
They did.
And it may not be the kind of blood you wanted because you wanted to see the criminality of George Floyd, or you didn't want to see Breonna as that the woman she really was, a working woman trying to make a way for her and her family. You don't want to see it because they're black.
They're black, yeah.
But the truth of the matter is blood that is shed. Think about it. When the sacrificial process was set in place in the Old Testament, it was all kind of blood being shed for those sacrifices. It wasn't just the blood of lambs. It was the blood of goats and the blood of oxen and pigeons and different things. They shed a lot of blood to prove to God their forgiveness, or to ask the forgiveness of God. And the same holds true in the natural nowadays. When we start looking to break things, it's going to come at a cost.
That's true. And it had, I see a change coming, I know what you're saying, and it's unfortunate that he had to die, but his death, George Floyd,
and don't get me wrong, I'm not condoning it. Yeah, I'm not condoning his death. I'm merely.
Oh no, I know what you're saying.
I'm making light of the fact that it was a necessary reality. There was no way around it, whether it was George Floyd or somebody who hasn't died yet, who may yet die. It was necessary.
This world woke up behind his death. And
absolutely.
God, everything was orchestrated just how God wanted it to happen. Everybody was at home. We couldn't do anything. And the people that have always believed that, it's not the cops' fault, you shouldn't have been running, you shouldn't have been doing this, they saw this man die in their face. They saw this. And they had to wake up. And, and it's just, so I totally agree with what you're saying. It was his death. Breonna, Sandra Bland, Michael Brown, none of their lives were taken in vain. It's wow, but this.
And think about this here too, Sonia. Nothing happens in the realm of men that God does not know about or allow.
Right.
So people can be mad at God for being who he is, but the truth is God's bigger picture is in the expanse of it only comes out after everything he wants done is fulfilled. And there has to be, you look at it in the sense biblically of Abraham and his son Jacob, and going up there to kill him. There had to be a ram in the bush because the promises of God have to be fulfilled. And while we live in such a secular and carnal world, even within the church that's in the world, it's confusing to a lot of believers because they don't believe God is who he is.
Right.
Because he's been fabricated over centuries, and he has lost his power by virtue of intellectualism. And now he has not lost his power. It's just that men have lost the ability or the power to believe in him. Exactly. The way that first church did, they believed he could do anything. You read the writings of these people down through the centuries before, 40 years away from Jesus dying, it started to change already. But that first church had a revelation of Jesus that was so powerful, they believed he was coming back, even while they were writing the stories.
That's right. Wow. That is amazing. And I just pray, like you said, Biden and Harris are not our saviors. I never would have, I'm just glad for the change. This week.
Breathe for a minute.
Yeah, just to breathe and, get some normalcy back. And, as we watched the inauguration earlier this week, it was just like a peace, that came over. And I'm thankful for that. But we got to work. We got some work to do, and people have to realize they got to vote. They voted in the 2 senators in Georgia a couple of weeks ago. They see that they can make a change, and I think that's going to be the new thing now. We made a change. Georgia is blue. Now let's make Mississippi blue. Let's, all these other places.
Yeah,
so,
you put things on the table that apply to these different judicial places, different states. Put things on the table where people can see themselves in it, because that's been, to me, the terrible thing about them going out and setting these different boundaries for votes, and literally closing out minorities and people of color.
Right.
You don't want to do the same thing that's been done to you if you really want change. Now, if you want to be tit for tat, that's different, because then you go at the Republicans the way they went at us. Or went at, and I don't mean us Democrats. I mean us, the people. Because to me, while they're playing the political game, it is the people that are in the middle of it all.
Mhm. That's true. That is true. Well, you didn't preach today, Pastor Cummings.
I think that it is important and imperative that we as leaders, especially on the side of what is relationally spiritual, that we be aware of what's going on around us, because we have to teach, lead, and train based on all information, not just biblical information alone.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. That is so true. That is absolutely true. So people don't probably know this either about you, but he also sings. Your first album, TC Finally, was released in 2007 with songs you wrote, sang, and played keyboard. So did you write all the songs?
Yeah, I wrote all of them, but maybe one. And actually, the first project was called Nothing's What It Seems, but it was a demo project. Then I took it and added more songs to it and created TC Finally. And then I did a project after that called L3, Living, Loving, Laughing. And it was just an old school vibe of stuff that I did, because I wanted to have some stuff that, like comfort food music.
Gotcha.
And then I did a project called Black Love, which is all duets. And I'm working on the 5th project actually right now. And all of these projects, I would have thought that I would have been led in the direction of doing gospel and worship, but the Lord didn't tell me that. He told me to write love songs, and so I write them until He tells me to shift. So the music is done with the same vigor of my prayer life before I go out to preach. It's praying, it's reading, it's studying, and making sure lyrically and musically it comes from a pure place. And it took me a long time to do it, because I was overly concerned about how people would take to me. And I finally got to the point where, you have to choose. You have to make choices every day. But in this world, you have to make the choice to be obedient, no matter what you're asked or told to do by the leading of God in your life. And then you have to be able to live with it, in spite of other people. So we've done well as a company doing these musics, and we're going to do even better in the future, because everything I needed to know and learn, I was learning while people were closing doors or trying to tell me you should do this or you should do that, but don't do that. And then you have to, like a scriptural perspective, when the disciples go and the Pharisees and Sadducees them beat them, and they said, look, we done told you not to speak in this man's name no more. And Peter and them speak up, and they said, well, you tell us, is it better to obey you or God? And the thing is it holds so much weight with me that I've learned to be obedient. But we learn obedience by what we go through, by the things we suffer.
That's true. It's interesting that you said that, because I sing also. I have a band, and I sing gospel. However, I do have an R&B jazz group. It's called Sonia Stamps Featuring Love's Groove. And my mother had a major issue when I started singing every Thursday night at this restaurant. It was a restaurant bar thing, but it was, it was really nice, really big, classy. And I had to tell her, I said, Mom, I know the word of God for myself, and gospel is my first love. However, God also made love songs. You have to realize that He is love, and you're not going to be with your mate on Amazing Grace. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. And a pastor came up to me while I was there one Thursday at intermission, and he said, I just want to tell you, I know you have a call in your life. And he said, he just pretty much, talked to me about what was going on. And he was like, and I love your set is very classy, it's intimate, and it's nothing, I'm not singing about anything crazy. I'm singing love songs, period. Another couple came up to me, and they were about to separate, and I sung Anita Baker Rapture, and that was their the song they danced off at their wedding. And they felt like that was confirmation to them that, they need to try to work things out, because that was their first date in some months, because they were, trying to break up and try to figure out what they were going to do. So I totally agree with what you said. Sometimes you can't, I have to tell my mom I have to live my own life, and what I'm doing is not wrong. So that was confirmation for me. Thank you so much. Hello? Hello?
This thing, it went on mute. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
No, because I had some of the very same issues. My friends were calling me with all kinds of stuff, about how you don't need to do. You're so anointed. You shouldn't be doing this, and you shouldn't. How you gonna tell me what I should or should not be doing, and you ain't called to it?
That's right.
It's like somebody, you out building the house, and somebody comes by who don't even know the first thing about building the house, and they tell you need to stop.
Right. That's
so
true.
It's with the music. The music, I really believe God gave me as a balancer, because with everything else I've done and am doing, you have to have something to balance you out. Because there's so much stuff. I love reading. I love plays. I love live music, and I've never been prejudiced toward the music. I just love music, because it of itself is not evil. It has more to do with the people that create it.
Exactly.
And the spirit of which it comes from. But I told people, look, I do this because this is what God told me to do. I'm not concerned about how you feel about it.
And neither am I.
Yeah, I really ain't. And I'm quick to tell people, look, what I do is biblical. I'm following what God gave me as a lead.
That's true. And, she's fine. When I sing in the church, of course, or I've been singing for the Dallas Mavericks. I've been doing the anthem for them since 2006, so she's fine with that. But the other one, she don't want to deal with it. So just pray for your sister. She'll be okay.
No, I know. I know, because I grew up in that real religious background of a church, and everybody, shaking their head at you because you're not doing what they're doing. But if we're all doing the same thing, what happens to the people who
need the most?
Yeah, and who need more? They need more than that.
That's true. Absolutely. I agree. So, it was reported that this album, your first album, CC Finally, was reminiscent of R&B powerhouses like Marvin Gaye, Sam Cooke, and Al Green. How do you feel to be compared to these legends?
Just humbled more than anything. It ain't like, being a professional athlete, you learn to stay humble and focus and let what you do speak for you. Because I would love going to the concerts, and we do live. I used to opened up a lot for Frankie Beverly and Maze, and did my last live show was with Kim, opening up for him. And I just would enjoy doing things, because big as I am, 6'9", 290, you come on stage and everybody like, this joker a ball player, he can't sing. And so, the first thing I normally would do on some of the sets is just sing happy birthday to the birthday girls at that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear them shushing up their guys. I'm like, shut up. I want to hear him. But to answer your question, I think it's an honor, to even be mentioned in the same breath. But I don't,
yeah.
I think these people, this is what they did for a living, and this was everything to them, a lot of them. And it's like a second, third, fourth career for me, too. So, but I don't play with stuff. If I'm in it, I'm in it.
So, when I first saw that you had an album, I instantly thought about Wayman Tisdale, who was also a basketball star but was an extraordinary bass player.
Definitely.
And Hang Time was my favorite album of his. He was such an amazing musician, and I'm truly thankful we were able to witness his artistry before he transitioned in 2009. Did you know him personally, or did you?
He got his start actually under me, because he used to come to, when we were playing against each other after the games, he would come and jam with me in the studio in Milwaukee and San Antonio. We had the same business manager, so we've known each other for a long time. We were pretty close. But he was really timid to start, and I encouraged him because he had the licks on the bass, but he could also sing.
He was he was amazing. I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
And I instantly, I instantly thought about him, and I was like, well, I wonder if they actually even played together or did anything together before he transitioned. But
yeah, we were talking about doing a tour because he already had a band in place, so I didn't have to worry about that. But a tour together where we mixed the blends of our musics and styles and stuff, and I was he and I were talking about it before he passed, before he, before he got his leg amputated, a part of it.
Wow. That would have been amazing. I would have been there. That would have been great. So which do you enjoy more, playing basketball or singing? Wait a minute. Or should I say playing basketball, singing, or acting? Because I remember you did a cameo on Love and Basketball as a bartender when Zeke and Quincy McCall came in for a daddy powwow.
Yeah, they're going to put you in hell for that bartender. Yeah, but actually that my part in that movie, I read for the father's part, and then they decided that they wanted more acting and less athletic stuff. Right. And then, but the part itself took 3 days to do, and it was much larger still. You'd have to get the DVD of Love and Basketball and see the deleted scenes. There are basketball scenes in there and a longer bar scene, I think.
Oh, that's my favorite movie. One of my, I've had that movie for years. I've seen it.
But what is funny and ironic too is that the younger generation don't know me as a ball player, just that guy who was in Love and Basketball, and that's funny.
That is very funny, because that was like a real snippet of who you are. And like you said, you were 18 years in the NBA. So that's amazing. But which one do you like the best, playing basketball, singing, or acting?
Right now, I like the singing and the acting more, because I don't see myself playing basketball no time soon. My girl is always trying to encourage me to get out the car when we see people playing in the park. Go out there and shoot with them some, and no, I don't want to do that. But I do camps and I do different things from time to time, about 2 or 3 a year, because I still have a love for the game. I just, after you played so long, you just don't think about it in terms of wanting to play.
Wow. That's true, yeah. So, Terry, before I let you go, what would you like the Blue Demon fans to remember about Coach Ray Meyer?
Just that he was a great man. I mean, everyone knows he was a great coach, but that he was a great man. I mean, he authored a lot of, literally brought a lot of young men into their manhood, and he did it the right way. I mean, and for any of us to think that he needed to have done more is to think that we should have been more. And then more would have come out of him, because a lot of times it's like the sponge, you get out what you put in.
That's true.
But he was to me a great man and a great influencer, and I hope that people through the years will start to see that part of him, not just the basketball side.
That's great. That is awesome. Terry, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Please tell the listeners how they can follow you on social media.
You can follow me on Facebook, either under my name, Terry Cummings, under Hope Echanito Ministries, or under my company, Cummings Entertainment Group. You can also find us at The Terry Cummings on TikTok, or Cummings Entertainment Group. Yeah. Cummings Entertainment Group on Instagram, or our website is hemi.church. Hemi.church.
Gotcha.
That's a lot.
HEMI.church? Okay.
That's our website.
And guys, you can also follow me at She Say Sports on Facebook. She Say Sports 23 on Instagram. And, well, that's my show for today. Until next time, this is Sonia with She Say Sports, and I'll see you on the radio.